Welcome back. So you've made it. This is the final video in the series, and in this video we're going to talk about a model that we created all for agencies that are in that top right-hand corner, that expertise quadrant. So as we set out and we started to interview different agencies, and as we conducted our observations, we began to model out what we would see as being the perfect way to differentiate within that expertise quadrant. And we found that there are really 4 areas that are top of mind, or things that need to be considered. The first, of course, is knowledge of the customer. And when I say that, I mean deep insight into the desired customer segments that you're targeting. And again, we talked all about how you target those customers and what your desired customer is. But then also having that information on the past customers. What do they like? What do they not like? And we'll dive into that. Also, one of the sections was all about externalities. That's an ongoing review of outside change. Those influencers, remember those first few videos? What are those influencers on the decision making? It's knowing about those and seeing those and being proactive about those and understanding what is changing within your market. Next is all about offerings. That's everything and anything about the products, the destinations, and the activities that you're selling. You need to know all of that in order to just get your foot in the door. If you don't know the products and services you're selling, people will see that and they'll move on. The last is organizational knowledge, and that's a strong drive for internal cohesion. And when I say that, and I talk about internal, it's both personally within yourself, but that is also about your teams and your organization and how they work and function together. Let's talk about the first area. The first area is all about the customer. Now let's think about this a bit. We talked about, when we were talking about being purposeful and being intentional, who is your customer? What do they want? What are they looking for? Well, when we start to unpack that, we say it's all about the personality. Do you know what their attitudes are? What are they interested in? What are their behavioral patterns? How do they respond emotionally to different stimulus? Those are things that are absolutely critical to know. Also, you need to ask yourself about the lifestyle of the customer. What is their manner of living? What do they do? Where do they go? What do they like to be known for? What are the characteristics that they portray? You also need to know what their motivators are. What's their manner of living? Why are they getting up in the morning? What gets them excited? What makes them enthusiastic about their trip? Those are extremely important. What are their interests? What makes them curious? What makes them ask more questions? Where do they find their enjoyment? All critical. What are their special needs as individuals? We talked at one point about generational differences and how that raises complexity. If it's grandma and grandpa traveling, if it's mom and dad, and if it's the kids, they all have different needs along the way of their trip. So maybe some of them are vegetarians, so you need to take that into their dietary considerations as they go from hotel to hotel. Or maybe they have a certain disability that they need to overcome and they need some extra time, or they need help with transport. It's also important to know, where are they finding value? What is it really important to them? And through that, what are they willing to pay for? What's going to save them time? What's going to make things simple? How can you mitigate risk, or how do you address issues as they come up? And how potentially are you always available? What are those things that they're going to pay you for? What are those services of value? The next section to focus on is externalities. Those are all of the things that influence your business. The first major segment that we saw, or major drill down area, was all around the industry shifts. We've spent plenty of time on that. That's understanding new business models, and that's not just within travel, that's within other industries. How have things changed? What are people doing? What are they experimenting with? What are they trying? As an example, if you haven't taken a look at the Khan Academy with education, they're doing some very innovative things around using online technology to deliver lessons to children. It's fascinating. How can you potentially leverage that sort of insight or that sort of model within your business? What are the other market forces that are driving those decisions? Are there trends that are emerging within business? One of those trends, as we've seen, is that commissions are continually being cut. So the sources of revenue are changing, and that's continuing to change. Can you predict those, or can you be more proactive in identifying those and then adjusting your business strategy in order to meet those changes. What are some of the other pressures on your business? Maybe you don't have the right skills or experiences. How are you going to see that ahead of time and be able to develop that? How are your connection mediums changing? We talk a lot about social. Is that something that you need to be using? How do you use it? How do your customers want you to connect with them on that medium? And as I mentioned, looking at those adjacent industries for just ideas. We spoke in the marketing example about Liberty Travel and how they've taken some of the very best principles of an Apple store and they've brought that into travel to help get people to just explore what's out there. All very good ideas. The next is about associations. How can you get yourself and get your people out into the market to learn more and to grow quicker? As an example, are you making the most out of the Ensemble Travel Network? Are you tapping into that management team in order to get perspective on the industry, perspective on Ensemble? Are you going to third parties and are you understanding how they're seeing at a much larger scale the industry shift? How are you connecting with your community? One of the great tools that we've seen in our research is just embedding yourself within the community, because the stronger your community is, the stronger that your potential business is going to be. You also develop relationships that way. You get access to new people. We talked about moving away from individuals and going to networks. What better way to do that than to get involved in the community and go to those people and have those face-to-face interactions? How could you tap into the universities that are within your locations and work with them to understand curriculum that's being developed, understand gaps in the talent that you need today and what you're seeing coming out of these schools? How could you bridge that? How could you help that? How could you leverage that insight to build a better worker and to build a better business? Could you take some of those principles and bring them in and use those to change the way you're thinking about the direction of your business and where you need to go? Are there certifications that you should be going out and pursuing? One example, when you look at the construction company DPR, they were one of our case studies in our broader set of research. One of the things that they task all of their employees to do is to truly go out and not just be the best construction company and help enable the business, but how are they taking their individual disciplines to new levels? As an example, if you're a project manager at DPR Construction, they ask you, how are you becoming the very best project manager that you can be, and how are you moving that discipline forward? Are you driving new innovation? All things that you need to be thinking about when we think about externalities. The third area is offerings. Now, you naturally expect in this, what are your products and services? Who are the preferred suppliers that you're working with? And then what is that offering that you've built with them to bring to customers? What experiences is that? So think about that from a product and service standpoint as what are the features of this? What is the price? What is the margin that you have to operate within? What is the timing that you need to be thinking about for these things? What are the benefits? What are the perks? What experiences does that offering afford, or does that product afford? Think about those. It's also all about the destination. Do you know about that geography? Do you know it inside and out? Do you know the pros and the cons of going there? Do you know the cultural differences and what people need to take into consideration based on their background? What are the norms? What do people do when they greet people? What do people expect for tips, as a simple example? And also, what are the special considerations that they need to keep in mind if they're going to travel to that destination? Next, you also need to think about the journey. What are the modes of transportation at that location? Let's say that you have a bit more of an adventurous crew. Maybe if they're in Egypt, they would like to do a camel ride through the desert. That's a little bit different. Also, think about it as what are the contexts that they need to have? If something goes wrong, who do they talk to? Is it you, or do you have someone on the ground there? Can you make sure that they understand that and they have all of the contact information that would be necessary? Heck, is there a way that you can bring that and you can put that within the phone that they're going to be using while they're on the trip so they don't have to carry paperwork? Another example. What vaccinations may they need? What are weather considerations based on the time of year that they'll be traveling there? The last piece of this is all around activities. What are the things to do? What are the things that you would recommend to see, and how would you do that if it were you in their place? Or how should they be doing it based on what they like to do or what potentially their needs are? Is there a better time of day in order to do it? So when should they do it? Is there lots of tourists around the middle of the day, so should they try to get there early? And also making sure that you're aligning all of these activities to interests, because again, one person may be a very active individual and their idea of the vacation would be to go out and play golf, and then to go out and to play other types of sports, or to go out into the ocean and kayak. Where for another person, it may be they just want to sit at the hotel pool and they want to relax. They want to go to the spa. So you may need to cater to all of those. That's all part of knowing the offering inside and out and relating that back to the customer. And then the last area that we saw many of these top agencies developing their people was first around soft skills. Are you developing their business and their sales acumen? Are you enabling them to be more commercially savvy? Are you enabling them to be able to sit down and confidently have conversations with a customer? Are you working on their emotional intelligence? Are you working on their communication skills so that you don't have unnecessary turmoil within your business? Are you getting them the right experiences? Can they see it? Can they smell it? Can they touch it? Can they hear it? Can they taste it? It's proven that when you actually experience something, it becomes easier for you to communicate that, and thus it becomes easier for you to sell that experience. Can you put in place ways to take that experience and potentially create scripts, maybe not just for the individual, but for others who may be their backups in case that they have to go out sick and they need to handle different customers? How are you developing your team in other ways? What are their specializations? Are you thinking about specializations? Or are you making them general contractors? What about your personality mix? Are you getting different ways of thinking? Or are you creating this homogeneous group? It's that diversity of perspective that really helps drive innovation and really helps you move forward and to deliver more customer value. What about camaraderie? People often overlook the simple fact that you need to cultivate and you need to develop and grow people's interaction together. Are they happy when they come to work? Do they enjoy working with their coworkers? It's not about a falsity in that respect. It's about truly wanting to be there. Are you developing that? And also, don't overlook yourself. What we notice is that some of the very best business leaders are very critical of themselves and they're constantly trying to improve. So I'd first ask you, do you know yourself? Do you understand what your purpose is? We talked about the agency purpose, and I gave you an example of my personal purpose. Do you have one? Have you spent the time and done your due diligence there? What about what your interests are? Or what about your aspirations individually and with your agency? Have you thought about those? Have you landed on those? How about your personality? Do you know how your personality impacts and affects those around you? Critical questions to ask yourself. So also ask yourself, how are you continually improving every day? If you know yourself and you know where your strengths are and you know where your gaps are, how are you then going to continually fortify those strengths and make sure that you're using those every single day? But then how are you going to build upon your weaknesses? How are you going to address those gaps? What could you be doing? Let's say that one of the things that you're looking to do from a marketing perspective is to get more through the line advertising or get more out in front of people, and it has some public speaking components to it. How are you going to learn from other public speakers about the journey that they've gone on, the practice that they needed to have, what they needed to do in order to get there? Are you doing that? So now we've talked about the 4 areas that you really need to be thinking about when you're building an expertise-based agency. Now, what we didn't see was anyone doing all of those really, really well. We've taken the best out of all of the different parts. The important thing to remember is that it's not about an individual being able to do all of these extremely well. You may have people that bring in different capabilities or different areas that they enable, that they light up on that chart, in that framework. So think about it that way. How could you maybe make people responsible for camaraderie or team building, for example? Or how could you bring people in and build templates all around products and services and the knowledge that you need there, or the experiences that they're having? Now with this, we've now concluded our video series, and it's been an absolute pleasure putting these together, conducting the research, and working with you and working with Ensemble. After reviewing those 12 videos, how much time are you spending in the business versus on the business? And based on what you've learned, and as you've gone through the workbook, how are you going to change that? How could you tomorrow make small tweaks to the way that you currently operate to facilitate and to enable this change? One way that you may want to do that is you may want to sit down and say, what are the first 3 actions that I'm going to take? If I could only take 3 actions out of this entire workbook in the next 90 days, what would those be? And what areas would they move forward with? Is it marketing? Are all 3 in marketing? Or is it a bit of hit and miss here and there? The thing to remember here is that it's a dimmer. It's not a switch. So you cannot go into your business and try to just drive these wide sweeping changes by flicking the switch on. Change doesn't embed itself, and change doesn't work when you try to do it that way. Or if it does, it's likely because you're forcing it down people's throats, and if they can't do it, they hit the road. So take a dimmer switch. Pilot these things. If you're going to try to implement the sales prototype in some way, shape, or form, why don't you pick a couple of your top agents and pilot that. Pilot the service fees with that. And if it works, then figure out why it worked, make changes and improvements, and then roll it out to a few more. Try it. Then a few more after that, until eventually it just becomes a part of the way that you do things. So thanks again. I appreciate your time, and I hope that this helps you drive your agency forward. Take care.